So we're recording in progress.
Okay. So welcome everybody. We still got 2 minutes before we officially start at 5:30. Just need to let everyone in. I'm Linda from ISPE Singapore, and you're seeing Pierre, who is CEO for No Deviation and no stranger to our affiliate. And Pierre is also chair of our community of practice for CQV, paperless CQV.
And CQV, I can do both.
Yeah, you can do an advert for your Thursday monthly.
Oh yeah, we can do that as well.
Meeting, which are all held online right now. And I think covers a lot of different discussions every month. So if there's interest in that, please do sign up for it. It's every single month, so that's a regular one.
Yeah.
Okay. And today we're going to be having a Technical Tuesday updates on ICH-Q9. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Now it's 5:30 on the dot, so I hand you over to Pierre. Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you. Are you staying until the end?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you can unmute people as I talk. So I'll try to make these things a little bit interactive, right? So if you are in the bus, or if you are at home, or if you are in a Starbucks, let's try to see how much we can interact between what I'm going to try to deliver and what you're going to remember. The idea of the Technical Tuesday, when we first launched it, was really to have more like a debate and a discussion. So you can stop me anytime, but I know you won't. You can put a message in the chat, and I will try to keep an eye on the chat so that I can see when you put a message. You can raise your hand to highlight that there is a message in the chat, whichever works. So the idea of the presentation today is to talk about the ICH-Q9. And if it was, a real interactive session, I would try to make a survey to understand how much you know about quality risk management, ICH in general, ICH-Q9 original, and the reason of why we have updated the ICH-Q9. Because I think it's going to be a little bit complicated in the 30 minutes or 40 minutes we have to make it all very interactive. I'm going to try to cover the ground, and then you can, interrupt me or ask questions or put emoji if you like what you hear. And if you know more than I do, which is possible, most likely, please feel free to complement what I'm saying with either your personal experience or an example or your understanding, because those ICH guidance are quite generic and high level and apply to a lot of things in the pharmaceutical system. So I'm going to share my screen. I make a few slides, and then I have dozens of slides, which are basically the ICH slide. But I'm not going to review them all. I might use them as a support as we discuss. So right now, you should see my screen, and you should see a PowerPoint presentation about quality risk management. And then for the people that are on your phone, I'm going to make it full screen so that you don't damage your eyes at reading it. So ICH-Q9, first version of ICH-Q9 quality risk management was issued, I think, in 2005, 2006, just a little bit before I come in Singapore in 2007, which is kind of, scary to realize that all the drugs I was taking when I was a kid were not made on the risk-based approach, and you really wonder which principle they were using to decide where to focus. So what is ICH-Q9 is really to try to focus on the risk to the patient and to the product. And so before we go into the Q9, I'm just going to cover the ground of what is the ICH, right? And where do they come from? So ICH is the International Council of Harmonization. So it's basically a group of GMP people sitting together and try to harmonize the practice and the GMP around the world, right? So you have a series of key organizations when we talk about regulatory, which are FDA, EMA, Japan, right? And they all had their GMP. And then one day they realized that those GMP might not be perfectly aligned, and they have come together to harmonize because the patient, regardless where you are in the world, have the same need, which is safe and efficient medicine. So the ICH get together, and they basically have a series of member, observer, and organization, right? So you can see that a member of the ICH is what we say, like a member will contribute to a new guidance, like the ICH Q9 or Q7 or any guidance, right? And that also means that they need to agree on what is written in the guidance, and then their input will be considered in the guidance. Then you have the observer, and you can see here a series of observers, which are people that can comment on the guidance, but if the member agree, we don't really need the observer input, right? We will consider them, right? But we might not implement them. And then you have a series of organizations. So I highlight a few that you might be familiar with. The European Council, the FDA, the HSA in Singapore are part of their ICH. That means that whatever comment they put will be integrated to the guidance document, right, and will be signed by them. The observer, which we take, for example, Malaysia or other, are just putting comment on it and reviewing the document, but might not necessarily be implementing it, right? And then you have other organizations like USP, the PICS, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that contribute. Now, the difference between a member and an observer is that if I contribute as a member, and the ICH will consider what you put in the document, after that, you have the obligation to implement the document in your GMP, right? So that ICH guidance will now be part of the things that you need to implement in the GMP, whether the observer don't have that obligation, right? So that's really the difference in the ICH between member and observer. So what does that mean for us is, while being part of the HSA or trying to supply market like Europe and FDA, when there is a new guidance like the ICH Q9, well, we know that when the new ICH Q9 will come and become effective, because at the moment it's in final public review and will become effective in January, well, we will need to implement that new guidance into our GMP. And when you talk about ICH, you have different type of guidance, right? You have the Q guidance, which is for quality. You have the S guidance, which is for safety, the E guidance for the efficacy. And you have, I think, the M guidance for everything else. So the easiest way, if you want to know the ICH guidance, I would say, let me check. Is simply to go on ICH here, yeah, on the website, ICH, right? And you can type QC here or whatever. And then you have the ICH.org. And on that website, you have all those guidance for free. So don't get scammed, right? You don't need to buy the guidance. They are all here available for free, and you can download them, right? So what I did today is simply download the guidance and talk about it. So you can see the ICH Q9. I'm going to make it a bit bigger for the people on their phone. This bit big. So you have the ICH Q9. They explain to you 9 November. This is really where when they published the guidance, who was member at the time, and then you see you can download the document. So an ICH document will be based on the business plan, the concept paper. So they first write the concept paper, which is, we want to go talk about that guidance. Then they make a business plan, then they come with a guideline. And then you can see that you have the revision 1, and which is work in progress. And here you have the business plan, the work plan, and then the concept paper, and then the draft guidance, which is what we're going to talk about it. And then they give you the presentation. So all I did is to take that presentation of ICH in PDF, put it in the ISP, and I'm going to talk about it. Now, it's perfectly legal to do that because, as we're going to see, you can use any of those material and they are put for public use, as long as you say, I get it from the ICH. But I think it's also interesting when you get those guidance, and this is the core of it. The guidance is very interesting. They tell you what you have to do and how to do it and things like that. Now, the business plan is interesting as well because that explains to you a little bit why did they write that guidance? What was the trigger? What were the driver? What was the problem they tried to solve by writing or revising a guidance? And if you read that, which is 1 or 2 page document, it gives you the perspective in which the regulatory body and all those members have worked together to solve a problem. And if you know the problem they try to solve, it helps you to better implement those guidance. So I do suggest that for people that work with ICH, you go to check here. Now you can see that there is a couple of guidance, which is good manufacturing practice, pharmaceutical development, quality risk management, pharmaceutical quality system. I highlight those 4 because they are my favorite. I work more in the C&Q field. So ICH Q8 is really about quality by design. ICH Q9 is about quality risk management, and ICH Q10 is about pharmaceutical quality system. Now, Q10 was written after Q9, logical. The thing is, Q10 refers to Q9, version 1. Now, when we revise Q9 can now refer to Q10, right? So they don't work independently, they complement each other. So if I go back to my little slide, this is how things are working in the pharma world, right? Illustration. We have ICH Q8, which talk about the design, about the process, the materials, and the facilities, right? And the quality by design. And then you have ICH Q10, which is talking about manufacturing. So how do I use that process, material, facility, and also talk about distribution to the patient, right? So this is the link, the handshake between Q8, which is the design, and Q10, which is the manufacturing, is really here on the process, material, and facility, and adding the distribution. Now, the things that bridge all those and the concept that apply in both Q8 and Q10 is really the Q9, which is the opportunity to impact the risk using quality risk management, right? And so we're going to discuss a little bit about what are the changes between the original Q9 and today's Q9. I take a break. Any question? Any hands? Any comment? I have a chat. I like that. Oh, no, it's just the welcome. Okay, so if you have any question, you can put them in the chat. So that's what is ICH, right? Because we are in Singapore, it's, you will see it. If you go into the European GMP, they mention ICH Q9. I would say that the biggest achievement of ICH is the ICH Q7, where ICH Q7 is the GMP for API. And if you go into the FDA or the EMA GMP, they straight says for the API GMP CICH Q7, right? So that is really the same across the world. So because we talked about risk, I'm going to define what is risk, and it's a very simple definition. The risk is, and I could talk about risk like for the rest of the evening, the risk is the probability of harm times the severity of harm, right? Is it how likely is something bad going to happen? And the severity is that if it happened, how bad it is for the patient, right? You multiply those, and that's what we call the risk. And what we need to do is to manage the risk. So being an engineer, I see that as a mathematical formula. And if I want to reduce the risk, I have basically 2 levels. I can either reduce the probability, make sure it doesn't happen, or less likely to happen, or I can reduce the severity, right? And based on where I am in the process, I can or I cannot have a leverage on the severity of the harm to the patient. So if I relate, and that definition of risk, of course, is not coming from ICHQ9, but what we do is that here we talk about risk to the quality, risk to the patient, right? So the severity would be an adulterated product. A severity would be a side effect. Those are the things that eventually you can tackle when you do your design of the drug or during the manufacturing of the drug, right? When you design your facility or when you operate your facility. So you can see that reducing the severity or reducing the probability come from the process design to the manufacturing. And that's why this ICHQ9 is really in between the Q8 and Q10, right? Me as an engineer working more like on equipment and facility design, I tend to focus on the probability because I cannot really affect or reduce the severity. A non-sterile product will always kill the patient. So my goal is to work on the probability that the product is sterile, right? So you need to keep that in mind. And then if for those that are interested, we can talk about risk priority number and detection and other. But that's what you will find in the original ICHQ9. Like I was telling you, the presentation you will see after is simply the presentation of ICH, and I put in the ISP because it's easier. I can edit it. You can download it in PDF. But you see that it may, with the exception of the ICH logo, be used, reproduced, incorporated into other work, adapted, modified, translate, distribute under a public license, provided that ICH copyright in presentation is acknowledged at all times. I just did that, right? So whatever you see is my interpretation of the ICHQ9 document, but you can have the source of the document. So why do they have to review the ICHQ9? There is 4 reasons why the quality risk management guidance had to be revised. And I think for anybody who've worked in the pharma industry, you will relate to those 4 reasons, right? So there is a high level of subjectivity in the risk assessment and in the quality risk management output. So that will be the first reason they have revised that guidance. And we will see within the document what have changed. But that also means that the working committee see that as a burden, a constraint to the full deployment of a good quality risk management system. So you could, you need to think that in and saying, okay, what is the subjectivity? Subjectivity is my perception of the risk versus the perception of the risk of the QA versus the perception of the risk if I was the patient, right? Not everything we do in risk quality risk management is quantitative. Some of those risk assessments are qualitative, right? We always play with number between 1 to 5, and then we always end up at 3 because we don't really know whether it's 1 or 5, and 3 is the middle of it, right? Which is not really helping it mitigating the risk. The other reason they have a bit is that they feel that they feel that we are failing to adequately manage supply and product availability risk. So that is a big difference between the ICHQ9 first edition and current edition, is that drug shortage is a risk for the patient that need to be considered in the risk assessment. Of course, drug quality is a primary target, but most of the shortage and ISP have, you can download from the ISP website the drug shortage surveys and things like that. But basically, if you fail into quality, you will remove your product from the market, right? And therefore, the patient will die or will suffer because he doesn't have access to the product, right? So that have been implemented in the new guidance to consider drug shortage in any quality risk management that you are making. And then, of course, when we talk about the recent COVID, we know too much what is drug shortage in terms of the availability of the vaccine at the beginning or other medicine, right? The third reason they review it is the lack of understanding as to what supply and product availability risk is, and the lack of clarity on the risk-based decision making. Right. So the last one, it's easier to explain. Is basically we make all those risk assessments, especially when I compare to what I do every day in CNQ. We spend a lot of time making risk assessment, but at the end of the day, we do the same test. Right, so you have all those people in a room discussing whether the risk is 4 or 5 and things like that. But at the end, we do the same test. We do the same frequency. And so what they are saying there is it's a waste of the resource. If you don't change the output based on your risk assessment, why have you spent so much time making the risk assessment? Is the level of effort proportional to the risk you try to mitigate and to the level of action you're going to have at the end, right? And so one of the key elements they try to enforce here is to say, by not focusing on what is the most critical, the highest risk, you are actually wasting resource, which is a risk on its own. Any question? Good. Then they say that the risk review process, we don't do it well in the pharma industry, right? And I can relate it to that. We do all those risk assessment in CNQ, and the next project we do the same risk assessment. I went to a facility that had a big risk assessment for their process in general, which was a blow-fill seal aseptic manufacturing. And when you ask them, can I see the risk assessment you did? They go on SharePoint. There is one guy who knows where it is. They go on SharePoint and they give you that revision one from 3 years ago. So you say, if we were better at doing our risk review, surely we will have gained more knowledge in the last 3 years of manufacturing as to update that quality risk management, right? So the first thing I generally do when I receive a risk assessment or a risk management document is to check how old is that document and how many revisions. I would be happy to have, revision 12 from yesterday, right? Because what we want is to keep it agile to address the new learning we have. And I'm sure we have new learning every day. But in that sense, they didn't change the guidance, and they will come with much more training material. So what I suggest, in the website I show you is that you keep following that website, because as new training material get available, it will be published over there. And then also ICH is organizing training. So that's how they're gonna address the question of the review. Yeah, this one I'm going to talk later about. So again, I'm sure we can give you all those slides where you have, you have 30 slides of what they try to achieve. But the idea of this session is not to bore you too much and maybe give you a little bit more insight practically. So what I did is I try to find it. It's to download the ICH document, right? And you can see here, so I did compare the ICH. I don't open it. Yeah, I did compare the original guidance with the new guidance, and you can see all the analytic of what has changed here. So you can, my computer is hanging. So you can see all the change between the two documents. And there is a little bit of change here and there. And then what I try to do is, based on that comparison of the old guidance versus the new guidance, what are where can I find the key element that have been added to address those 4 points that are the reason of why the guidance has been revised. And that's what I told you. It's interesting to understand why do they revise a guidance, because like that, when you read the new one and you realize that something has changed, you can relate that change to the intention that they want to transfer, right? The knowledge they want to transfer. So if I go in, you can see, wait, I'm going to skip those. So what I want to do, this is a new guidance. And as you can see, more or less, it's still number 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's still for public comment. And what they did is that they changed some of the paragraphs. So what I did is basically trying to understand what are those change and what I'll show you the final product. So in my little engineering head, I took those 4 change, right? Which is the high level of subjectivity, the product availability, the lack of understanding as to what constitutes the formality of the QRM work, and the lack of clarity on the risk-based decision-making. And those are the 4 reasons the guidance has been revised. And I have highlighted in the introduction the addition, right? And then you can do that for the whole document, right? You will have the grit to listen to me if I do it for the whole document. So we're going to focus on the first few pages. Okay. No. So this is something they've added in the document, right? In addition, subjectivity can directly impact the effectiveness of a risk management activity and the decision made. In relation to pharmaceutical, also there are a variety of stakeholders, including patient and medical practitioners. So you can see that when they say that subjectivity can impact and they want to address it, they clearly put it in the introduction, right? And it is very important and reinforce the fact that when you do a quality risk assessment, you need to have a person which is well adverse of how to mentor or how to moderate that exercise. It's not that easy. And then you need to avoid to fall into a rabbit hole where you only see the risk that you know, and you don't have a proper panel of a bigger vision, and therefore you could either take the wrong decision, or you could spend too much effort at things that are, you might miss the elephant in the room, to put it simply. The other thing they have added is that the protection of the patient by managing the risk to quality and availability. When availability risk arise from quality manufacturing issue, should be considered as prime importance. So this is really the second part, what they have, the reason why they have revised this guidance, right, is to avoid drug shortage and to assess the impact of a drug shortage to the patient. Whether in the past we would say we need to do what is best for the quality, but we didn't consider that a drug shortage could actually affect the patient, right? I was working on a project in South Africa where we make HIV medicine, right? And, we need to shut down the facility. And if you don't reopen on time for your project, completion, you have a drug shortage of a HIV drug, and you could imagine the impact that could have on the life of people, right? So drug shortage is something that could affect the patient safety. So far, so good. Everybody is still with me. And then here, what they put in green, so just go back in here, the lack of clarity on risk-based decision-making. They say a proactive approach, so this is something that have been changed compared to the previous version, that's why it's highlighted, right? A proactive approach to quality risk management facilitate continual improvement. And there you can, for those who know ICHQ 10, which is manufacturing, continual improvement is an obligation of the pharmaceutical quality system, right? So here you can really see how having revised the ICHQ 9 after having read the ICHQ-10, help you to put those references that are enabler of what they ask you in the pharmaceutical quality system. So a proactive approach to quality risk management facilitates continual improvement and is of strategic importance in achieving an effective pharmaceutical quality system. Additionally, use of the quality risk management can improve the decision-making if a quality problem arises. In the development phase, quality risk management is part of a building knowledge and understanding risk scenario so that appropriate risk control can be decided upon during the technology transfer for use during the commercial manufacturing phase. I'm not so good at reading, but basically what they say there. You need to have a proactive approach of quality risk management. And we're going to revise that at the end of the next page, right? So a proactive approach is you don't wait for a problem to arise to get a task force to say, let's make a risk assessment. You should have, as a tools to resolve your problem, a quality risk assessment already made. That's why you review your quality risk assessment, because obviously if something happened, either it was in your risk assessment, but you had decided that it didn't happen so often, and yet it happened. So should I revise my likelihood of happening? The severity should be well known, because that will help you to identify the level of effort you need to do to solve the problem, right? Not all CAPA need to have the same resource. If it's a low risk for the severity, I can already, do a triage and decide the corrective and preventive action. So that's what really a proactive risk assessment will help you when they say can improve the decision-making in quality problem arise. That's why, and the contamination control strategy that is coming in the Annex 1 is very well aligned with a proactive risk assessment, right? We try to control the risk in the manufacturing, and they put it here, right? For use during the commercial manufacturing phase, right? So we try to manage the risk and then control it. And you can't manage and control something you didn't proactively identify. And then, of course, when you do your first one, it's just a plan. It's based on previous knowledge. And as you build your facility and operate your facility, you gain knowledge. So if you want to continuously improve, then you need to review that knowledge. And that means you need to review your quality risk management. So all those things are what the inspector in the world expect, right? But I don't like to talk about the inspector. I don't want to do compliance for the inspector. All those things are the tools you have to give a quality product to your patient. You owe it to the patient to know what you are doing and to know when you put the patient at risk. And that's what you have to do. Now, if you don't have that risk assessment, what could happen is that you never identify the severity. And by the whole time you have those discussions, you create a drug shortage. So again, having a proactive risk assessment will help us to have drug availability, because we will be faster on making decisions. So that's how I link all those paragraphs in the ICHQ-9. The pink one, what was the pink one again? The pink one is a lack of understanding as of what constitutes a formality of a quality risk management, right? And we see that a lot, right? I'll try to, where's my document? I try to relate it to in my C&Q world, but understanding, so I'm gonna read it first. An understanding of formality in quality risk management, and you will see that chapter 5 is a complete new chapter talking about that, right? Because they realize that the level of the formality is the level of effort and the level of the formality of the record of that risk management system may lead to resource being used more efficiently, where lower risk issues are dealt via less formal means, freeing up resource for managing higher risk issue and more complex problems that may require increased level of rigor and effort. So again, you need to classify your risk, and based on that, engage the same resource, right? And the level of classification or the level of that quality risk management need to be proportional as well to the triage you are trying to make. So if I project myself in the C&Q world, the first quality risk management step we do is a system impact assessment, right? It's very simple tools where we ask a series of 8 or 9 questions. Again, we can explain that in the ISPE baseline guide. And based on that, we decide whether a system have a direct or non-direct impact on the quality of the product. If we have a direct impact, we're going to do qualification, which is the highest level of effort to demonstrate the system is fit for intended use. If it's a non-direct impact, I will still need to do commissioning, but the way I record my test and the way I define my system is less than for the direct impact. And then, again, when I have non-conformity during my execution and later on when I have deviation during my execution, I should be able to spend the right amount of effort for a missing tag versus a critical process parameter which is not in control, right? There could be a pre-agreed way to solve problem with my quality assurance level so that they don't need to review everything if I fall in a series of predefined action, but I will call them when those predefined actions don't apply because I might have an impact on quality that need to be reassessed, right? So this is, I do expect that when those things come into place, we're going to be challenged if every kappa we have on the site take 30 days to solve, regardless whether they were easy or not to solve, right? If you look at your analytics and your metrics, the easy one should be closed within 1 or 2 days. The complicated one should be closed within 1 or 2 weeks, right? Because if everything takes 2 weeks, you go back to having a risk of drug shortage, right? A risk of using your resource where you miss the elephant in the room because everybody is trying to do the root cause of a missing tag. So that's what they're saying here, right? And then the last things I want to highlight in this document is that sentence, which is quality risk management should not be used in a manner where decisions are made that justify a practice that would otherwise, in accordance with official guidance and or regulation, be deemed unacceptable. What does that mean is you cannot do a quality risk management and says, well, it's okay, we don't have to do anything, right? And you will do that, and we all did it in some, in some form of shape where we didn't mitigate a risk properly, a risk arises, and there is nothing we can do about it. So we try to justify that it's okay by doing a retroactive risk assessment. And that's why, again, in the beginning of the document, they really talk about proactive risk assessment to help you to make the decision, right? And if you don't have that, no matter what you do at the end, it will always sound like you were reacting, firefighting, and if your conclusion is that the risk is low, you look like justifying why you did nothing at the first place, right? And that's how I would read it. So making risk assessment after things happen without, it's okay to take the original one and say, we were not so good at the original, we need to revise it, right? It's a new risk, it's things like that. If you're nothing and you say, there is nothing I can choose, let's make a risk assessment to justify we keep it as it is. Well, that now will become an observation, right? So that brings us back to be proactive in your quality risk management. So that's in a nutshell, and then there is much more in the document, right? But again, I'm happy to take question or to give example. But I think if you have one thing to remember is that those are the main change, those are the main reason, and they've put it in the introduction of the document, and I've tried to highlight those 4 reasons in that introduction. They go a little bit more in detail in the rest of the document, but mainly those are the ones you need to hunt in your current practice. Those are the ones where we expect to get better, right? And having done a little bit of quality risk management in the last 15 years I'm in Singapore, I can totally relate to how complicated it is to apply those simple principles. And that's why I think it's also important to sometimes step back. I had a big discussion with one of my mentors, which, from a scientific and process understanding is a guy that is brilliant. He knows all the equation of his vaccine by heart. He can draw them on the board. He know every chemical reaction, why it could go wrong. And he made a fantastic risk assessment. And he got a bit frustrated because people don't use it. And again, not everybody has the capability or the ability to understand those risk assessments. So when you do quality risk management, one of the big parts of it is the communication, is to be able to communicate those things exist. So again, don't store them on SharePoint revision 1 of 10 years ago. Try to make it by bite size so that we can explain to supervisor, we can explain to operator, we can explain to our cleaner what is their role in the quality risk management. And we need to make it in a way to communicate that they can understand, right? And the same, it goes from a very thorough contamination control strategy, design of the facility and things like that, to explaining to people why following a procedure is so important. Of course, we need to follow the procedure. But if you explain to people why it's important they follow the procedure and mainly what happened when they don't follow it, you really help them to understand that whole work of quality risk management we are putting. The other change, I think I put, they had, and it's a small change, but it's significant. So this is really when this one, you need to be able to draw it by heart if you do quality risk management, right? Which is the core of the quality risk management, which is initiate the quality risk management process. And then you have a first phase, which is the risk assessment, a second phase, which is the risk control, and then you accept the residual risk, and then you have that risk review where we want to be better at, right? Then you have a communication tools at every step and in both directions. And if you do all that, you do risk management, right? What we do mainly is a risk assessment. And we're not so good at doing the rest, right? We might do a first pass of risk control, but then definitely the review and assessment. You see that when you have a trend, right? We see periodic review, which again is mandated in ICHQ 10, and you have the trend of a facility and there is no alarm. But you can obviously see from the trend that you're not in control. Yeah, but there is no alarm. So we continue. I agree there is no alarm, but there is a risk of loss of control, right? And the risk is not only given by the alarm. So in that risk review, we didn't have the event, but we're more likely to get it. So we should do something about it, right? The big change here is this box. Let me take that one, right? They call it hazard identification. So hazard is something that can hurt the patient, right? And in the original ICHQ 9, it was called risk identification. So it's a bit semantic, but that's a big change because you identify what could go wrong. Then you see how likely it's going to go wrong. And then you evaluate, the severity of that hazard going wrong. Because the risk is the multiplication of the likelihood and the severity. So the change in that ICHQ 9, that's why you can test, your QA if you read the new ICHQ 9. We don't talk about risk identification anymore, we talk about hazard identification. And then after that, you go to the risk reduction, right? What can we do to reduce the risk? What are the measures? And then again, engineering control are better than procedural control. And then you accept the risk, and you can eventually give PPE to a person. Like you can give another medicine to counter the side effect of the first medicine to reduce the severity of those side effects, right? Assuming that the benefit of taking the first drug is, more than the side effect is created. And you can apply that for an autoclave, you can apply that for an alarm, you can apply that for calibration, you can apply that for using a supply chain, you can apply that for a process step, a control temperature. So you really do, those principles are the foundation of any decision you will do if you work in the pharmaceutical world, right? What is the risk of not washing your hand when you go out of the toilet, right? Ask yourself every time the question, and I'm sure you get wash your hand every time you go to the toilet, right? So this is the things you need to consider. And then, like I told you the risk review and the risk communication, those things didn't change. And the risk communication is key, because if you do all that and you don't communicate it to the people that come after you have done it, it's like you did nothing. You're not managing the risk, right? Communication is a key element of quality risk management. And the same thing, if you see something on site that is not supposed to happen, you need to report it. Because if you don't report it, we can't review the likelihood of those things happening. And then we think everything is okay until it's not okay, right? So that's my take on the ICHQ9 and the revision. So expect this document to become available and effective in January. It was presented in Singapore by Rick Freeman from the FDA, which is an auditor which tend to talk in PDA and ISP meeting, and he's really passionate about it. And I will say that when you read it, try to remember that you're reading to find those 4 points, because this is where we need to improve. So you could take those 4 points and go back in your facility and try to identify where are those happening and what can you do, to make them better. That was ICHQ9 revision 1 in a nutshell. Is there any question?
Thank you, Pierre. Does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to unmute, or any observations.
Or any experience, complement information.
We've got a nice group of people from all over the world, in fact, and the region. So it'll be good to hear your take on things.
So what we can do is I can put my email address in the chat. So if you have any question or any comment that you would like to address, I'll be happy to learn more about it. If there is anything I missed that you think was important to highlight, I'll be happy to follow up with everybody with an email with a good comment, and you can decide whether you want to be named or not. The idea of the ISP Technical Tuesday is to share knowledge, right? And I don't have all that knowledge, so I'm happy to learn as well from everybody's experience perspective, whether it's clear or not. Like I say, communication is a big important factor in quality risk management. So communication goes both ways. And if you want to do a working group, guys, feel free. We can review the document. I'm currently working on, making a series trying to highlight every bits and change and give a little example of those change and what was written before and after. So yeah, I'm doing that on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow up and comment, and we can continue the discussion there as well.
Thank you, Pierre. So if no one has any questions, I think, oh, okay. Sammy just says thank you. Thank you for that. Does anyone want to share anything? If not, I think we're going to be finishing 10 minutes early.
Okay.
And let you go. Thank you, Pierre, for your time and sharing your experience with us. Thank you all for turning up and joining us this evening, and wishing everyone a good rest of evening and good day to those people in Europe who've joined us. And yeah, hope to see you again at our next Technical Tuesday. There'll be another one next week, which is on contamination control strategies. So if you haven't already signed up for that, please do so, and look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, and the next week is related to ICHQ9 and quality risk management, right? So,
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you
you.
all for coming, and have a great evening. Thanks, Pierre.
Welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.